It was December, and Chicago had that old refrigerator breath that makes even the street lamps shiver. The pharmacy's floor squeaked where the linoleum lifted by the greeting cards. The clock hopped a second at a time without believing in minutes. I was doing the close, till counted, aspirin fronted, cardboard dumped, with the dopamine of a kid who'd just been told he might get a better job than minimum wage and free lint. He came in like he'd forgotten something, then remembered what it was me. Blue windbreaker, contractor's boots, hat with salt clinging to the rim, construction dust respectable. He had that Midwestern chin that promises competence whether or not it's earned. He touched the counter with 2 fingers like a man who owns a tape measure. "You the one asking about work?" he said. He didn't have to raise his voice. Confidence does its own acoustics. I'd left my name on an index card by the bulletin board, between a piano teacher's pull tabs and an apartment advertised as cozy for artists, which is Chicago for a window that won't open. The card had my neatest handwriting, after school, weekends, good with my hands, the phrase I would later come to wish I had never learned to be proud of. "That's me," I said, and learned, right there, right then, how fast a night decides what kind of story it wants to be. "PDM contractors," he said, tapping his jacket like a cop pats a badge. "Driveways, rehabs, odds and ends. Good money for boys who show up when they say they will. You want to talk 5 minutes?" He gave the offer like a gift you shouldn't insult. The pharmacist was counting Schedule 2s, which means don't interrupt. The assistant had ducked out already to claim the warm seat on the bus. I felt the quiet of small stores after hours, radios down to their bones, glass looking for reasons to rattle. He smiled like he knew how it felt inside a boy's chest when somebody calls him useful. "I get off in 10, I said. "You want to talk then?" He checked his watch, the way men do when they intend to be generous. "I'll wait," he said. "Got a job south of here tomorrow. Be good to slot you." When he smiled, the corners of his mouth did a little apology, like he regretted the size of his teeth. He turned, browsed nothing, looked at reading glasses he didn't need, made himself at home inside our fluorescents. When I locked the front, he was already out there with the engine going. Chevy with the kind of bench seat that forgives sins. He leaned across and popped the passenger door like we'd rehearsed. The car smelled like wet wool and a smoker who'd promised to quit next week. It was a working man's car. My father had one. On purpose or not, he wore my father like a costume. "I'm John," he said, once the car was swallowing our breath. "Gonna be honest, I'm picky. Boys say they'll work and then don't. Boys say they can lift and then can't. Boys have attitudes. I don't pay for attitudes." "I can lift," I said. "You look like you can," he said, measuring me with approval that felt like a space heater. "You drink?" "Sometimes." He smiled. "You drink when I hand you one?" "Sometimes," I said again, and he laughed like he liked that I had a line. "Good," he said. "We'll get on." We pulled into the night, the tires printing wet decisions. "Got your own boots? Can you be at a site before your mother gets up?" "Yes," I said, "if I know where I'm going." "You'll know," he said. "You're a North Side kid. Where you from?" "Edison Park," I said. "Nice, little church on the corner that thinks it's a cathedral. Men shovel their sidewalks there before God even asks." "Your daddy in the trades?" he asked like he already knew. "Plumber." I said it proudly. My father's hands were rituals. "Good man," he said, as if we were toasting the idea of fathers. "We like sons of good men. They think a certain way. They don't make messes." He turned down the radio, which had been talking about snow with the same tone you'd use to recite the Lord's Prayer. "You play ball?" "Went out for it. Didn't have the legs." "You got arms," he said. We drove past houses doing their advent. Nativity scenes guarded by plastic shepherds already leaning into January. A clown's face on a poster stapled to a telephone pole made me look twice before I realized it was for a church carnival, the kind that sells pierogies and beer. He caught me looking at the poster and smiled sideways. "You like magic?" he asked. "Like everyone," I said. "Everyone says no," he said. "They like to pretend they're grown. Everybody wants to be fooled." He drove like he wrote the street. "Sometimes I do a little handcuff trick at block parties. You do the cuffs on yourself, I do them on me. You can't get out, I can." He tapped his temple. "Difference is," he made a key turning motion near his ear, "I think it through." It's not a trick if you have the key, I said. It's all a trick, he said. I just know where it ends. The heater threw the kind of warmth that makes a person sleepy enough to trust. He asked about school. He asked about whether I'd rather pull demo or finish work. He asked enough past the first question that it felt like he wanted the shape of me, not just my muscles. You got a steady girl? He asked. No. That's good, he said, businesslike. Less distraction. Boys with girls make plans they can't keep. Boys without them are hungry. You offering the job or the sermon? Same thing, he said, and it landed like a joke, but wasn't one. He steered us toward the city's seams, the places where a neighborhood ends not because of a sign, but because the streetlights go a little sick. He talked as if he were keeping me from noticing it. Tomorrow's a porch, day after a basement. Saturday maybe a run to a storage unit I got in Norwood Park. You got a strong back? We'll put that back to work. Norwood Park, I said, making it sound like home, and my chest unknotted a little. The map in my head, smug with its own wisdom. He's one of us. We passed a police car angled toward a mouth of alley. The officer inside looked at us like the night was a standardized test. He turned his head slowly as we went by. The man beside me barely glanced. You nervous around police? He asked, lightly. I don't like tickets, I said. Me either, he said. They don't like me either. He laughed, pleased with his own symmetry. You said you had a storage unit, I asked. You bring guys there after a shift? Bring boys there all the time, he said, tapping the steering wheel to a rhythm only he heard. You store anything. You have to move it. You move anything, you need hands. Hands like yours. That cool? Cool, I said. A little alarm bell ringing, one I told myself was just my mother's voice borrowing my brain. Don't go places you can't name, and don't get in cars. And yet, Chicago pays you for being useful and punishes you for being careful. Or we can talk in my office tonight, he offered, as if he sensed the small math happening in me and wanted to do me the favor of not making me carry it alone. Show you the forms, give you the rate, prove I'm not selling you a bridge. You got an office open this late? I asked. At my house, he said, casual. Basement. I keep files everywhere because work is everywhere. I looked out at the rain. The wet glass made the city a Monet for a second. Soft, forgiving, dishonest. Just for forms? I said. And to see you're the right type, he said. I don't hire anyone who can't handle 10 minutes of sitting still and looking me in the face. He grinned. It held no warmth. Boys fidget, men don't. I heard my father again in that sentence, and the trick landed, slick as wet leaves. 10 minutes, I said, like a polite hostage signing his own terms of release. Then, if it feels right, when do I start? Tomorrow, he said. 5 a.m. Don't make me find you. He turned onto a residential street with the kind of confidence that knows exactly where the cracks are. The houses were siblings, bungalows with stoops you can shovel in a single poem. He turned into a driveway that looked like it had hosted 100 comings and goings, and none remembered. The house had Christmas on it like a badge, lights done earnestly, not stylishly, a Santa with a beard that didn't fit, a clown painting smiled at the curtained window. I told myself a lot of men keep weird art. I told myself a lot of priests do too. Shoes off at the door, he said, turning the key. I got carpet that doesn't like the outside. Mine's worse, I said. We had brown shag when I was little. It ate toys. He laughed. Shag's forgiveness, he said. I like carpet that tells the truth. He opened his door on a house that smelled like chlorine and aftershave and the quiet of men who live by themselves and tell their mothers they don't. The living room was a museum for stories he wanted you to believe about him. Plaques, framed thank yous, handshakes in pictures where the other man is always a little out of focus. On one wall, against every instinct I had, a photo of a clown with red cheeks and a smile that came to a point too soon. Pogo, the caption beneath it said, as if that were a saint and not a mask. You do parties? I asked. Why did I ask? Because normal is a language and my tongue wanted to sound fluent. Not as much as I used to, he said. Kids don't care about workmanship anymore. He headed for the hallway. Come on, office is this way. Don't touch the shelf of trophies unless you want to talk about hard work. We passed a bathroom where a box fan hummed at the shower curtain like a private audience. We passed a bedroom with a door almost closed, the kind of almost that announces not now but doesn't say never. We went down a few stairs into the basement where the air went colder, then more human. A dehumidifier clicked like a dog politely asking to be praised. There was a couch that had been a bed and would be again. There was a table with a deck of cards on it and a single cuff lying beside it like a clever cousin. There was a smell, sweet, fake, chemical, as if someone had tried to Windex their conscience. "Sit," he said, not unkind, and as I sat, the chair made a sound like a joke on my weight. He sat across from me, leaned back, crossed his legs like a coach about to tell a boy where he must stand to stop the play. He folded his hands on his stomach. "So," he said, "tell me why you want to work." "Because I can," I said. "Because I don't want to ask my dad for gas money anymore. Because I want to buy a guitar that doesn't buzz." "Not drugs," he said, watching my face like it was a TV worth keeping. "No," I said. "I see enough of them at the pharmacy." He nodded, satisfied with his own discernment. He looked at my hands the way a chef looks at a knife he's considering. "You know the difference between a boy and a man?" he asked. "Do I want to hear your version?" He smiled as if we were trading jokes the way men do when they're practicing being a little cruel. "A man takes the trick and makes it his. A boy waits for somebody to show him." He picked up the handcuff on the table, let it dangle on one finger like a charm. He put his wrist through, closed it. The ratchet sound was almost friendly. He palmed the key the way magicians do. Casual, same hand that made the trap spring. He slipped free, fast enough to look like a habit. "I like to know what boys do when they think they can't get out of something," he said. "You want to try?" "No," I said, because the part of me that has saved me before saved me again, and the word came out clean. He cocked his head, impressed. "Smart," he said, "but try anyway." He ran the other cuff over the table with 2 fingers. It came toward me like a slow coin. "Won't hurt. I just want to see how you move." The room listened to the dehumidifier breathe. My chair felt like it had been told to be forgiving and didn't know how. I could have said no again and gone up the stairs smiling like a boy who will be at work at 5. I could have been rude and seen where that landed me. I looked at the cuff, at his eyes, at the square of linoleum missing by the drain, at the deck of cards with the joker turned face up like a warning. My hand slid toward the cuff the way a mouth says yes when it means wait. He watched the move like he'd bet on it. "Why you want to please me?" he asked softly. "I don't," I said, and hated how immediately unconvincing I sounded. "You want me to want you?" he said, and there was no heat in it, just diagnosis. "That's the trick of being young. You think the job is a door and I'm the doorman." He reached, and with the care of a man training a dog to sit without complaint, turned my hand palm up. "Trust is money," he said. His thumb pressed the wrist's soft center, and I felt my pulse answer him like I owed him. He closed the cuff. The metal met itself with the same sound a coin makes when you put it back because you realize it's the wrong one. "Now," he said, leaning back, admiring, "we begin." The cuff was not tight. That was its intelligence. Too loose and you joke, too tight and you fight. This was an invitation to be polite. He offered me the key and then immediately tucked it back in the same hand. "Go ahead," he said. "Get out." "With one?" I said. "With one," he agreed. "If you can't get out of one, you don't deserve the second. That's what I tell boys. That's what my dad told me." I bowed my head as if to inspect the cuff, really to let my face have one private second to come to an agreement with my lungs. The metal smelled like fingers. The little hinge winked at me like an accomplice it didn't plan to be. I twisted, tested, found nothing that agreed to be a lever. He smiled. He let me spend 30 seconds, then 60. He liked the way I tried because he liked watching boys trim themselves to fit his version of a neat exit. "Okay," he said, like a teacher who's about to take the pencil away from a kid who's going to write S's the wrong way forever. "Now, this is the trick everybody misses. They think it's their hand that matters. It's not. It's me." He slipped his own wrist into the open cuff and somehow, in the same movement, had the key and the lock and the little wiggle that obeys him. The cuff licked closed and then opened like a pilot light. He was free again. He handed me the cuff like it wasn't a weapon. "Difference between you and me?" he asked, that smile doing the work his hands didn't. "I know how to keep the key." "The trick is you have the key," I said. "The trick," he said, almost tenderly, "is I am the key." The dehumidifier clicked off, and in the sudden silence I heard the house settle above us. Footsteps? Heat? The sigh of a man who learned once how to make his space presentable to strangers, and then stopped with practicing the parts that mattered. "Take off your jacket," he said. Not a question. A test of whether I was going to remain polite. He said it with the same voice men use to tell you your socks don't match. I constellated a few reasons: heat, comfort, habit, and found none of them worth insulting. I shrugged one sleeve, then the other, and the cuff made the angle weird enough that I forgot for a second it was there. He noticed. He loved that. "You're tidy," he said. "That's why I stopped for you." "You found me," I said, meaning it more ways than one. "Boys like you find me," he corrected. "Every day, at counters, at buses, at parking lots. They step into my lane and stay there." He looked at the ceiling again, not at me, like the next line was taped up there. "You know what I am?" he asked. "Contractor," I said. "Father?" he said. Then, after letting that sit, principal, coach, clown. He smiled without heat. "Whatever gets you to listen." The word clown made a shape in the air, which my body recognized before my brain. It scared me in that loose, weird way that childhood fright does, the sense you are about to be laughed at, and that the laugh will never stop. He saw the tiny movement on my face. "Scared?" he asked. "Yes," I said. This truth I could afford. "Good," he said. "Scared is helpful." He rose. I did not. He walked to a shelf and took down a Polaroid camera, the kind that performs its own magic, bad chemicals taught to bloom on paper. He shook it once like a priest at Mass. Then he set it down again, as if he had thought better. I had the electric impression of a man who likes to rehearse not only the act, but the notion of it. "Stand," he said. "Why?" I said. "Because a man told you to," he said, a little bite in it now. "No," I said to my own surprise, and the word came out as a small, clean thing. He registered it like he'd been bitten by a well-trained dog who had never in its life considered disobedience. He reached, not fast, for my cuffed wrist. I reached, not slow, for the belt loop at my waist, fed the cuff through it, and snapped the free circle shut around the denim. He stopped, smiling. He liked the novelty. "Playful," he said. "We're going to get along." "Now you can't pull me," I said. I don't know why I said it, maybe to narrate my trick to myself, to make it real by making it English. He leaned over me, closer than necessary, and the smell of his breath was inhumanly sweet. The kind of sweet a man gets by sucking on something to kill a smell that would give him away. "You think you invented the cuff to the belt loop?" he said warmly. "Son, I invent the loop." He reached behind me, released the cuff with a turn and a press that seemed to have been designed for this precise treachery. The circle kissed open. My life got smaller. "Okay," he said, satisfied with himself. "Now we stand." I stood. I felt the subtle lurch in his mood, like wind changing from one block to the next. Up the stairs a floorboard ticked. He put his hands on my shoulders and squeezed once as if testing fruit. "You ever been to a wake?" he asked suddenly. "Yes." "You good at standing still while people talk at you?" "I can be." He nodded. "That's all this is," he said. "It's a wake for the version of you that makes messes." "I don't make messes," I said, and he grinned, delighted by my compliance. "Prove it," he said. He led me, not by touching, by pointing, to the drain in the floor. The cuff dug a little. I swallowed a noise. He liked the swallow. He liked that my body wanted to be quieter than my fear. He took out a length of white rope, the kind that doesn't work on ships. He hummed something that might have been a hymn if it hadn't lost its words. He made a loop. He made a second. He made a figure 8 out of me. "You know what this is?" he asked. "A knot," I said. "A policy," he said, and he drew it gently until my wrists had a new vocabulary. I thought of my father's hands teaching me to tie twine around bundles of molding. He'd say, "Never trust a knot you can't name." I didn't know what to call this one, but someone else's decision. He stepped back to admire his work. My heart decided to distrust me. My mouth told the truth anyway. "I have to be home by 10, I said. "My mother calls the house at 10. If I don't pick up, she calls my father. If he doesn't pick up, she calls the neighbor with the key. If the neighbor doesn't answer, she calls the station." That last verb I made up, but it felt good in my mouth. He smiled, slow, and for the first time it had some heat in it. "What station?" he asked, amused. "De Plain," I said. because that's what a boy says when he learns the geography of where fear is supposed to help him. They know my dad. He unclogs their drains. He fixes their faces when their pipes burst and they've run out of jokes. He considered whether he cared. I saw him care for exactly 1 second, then uncare. He stroked his chin with 2 fingers, a stage move. "Let's make sure you're home by 10 then," he said. He lifted the rope tail like a ribbon. "We can do a lot before 10. He didn't march me anywhere. He just stood there until the room obeyed him. That's part of his trick. He lets the basement become the hand on your back. He turned the radio up just enough to feel like company, but too low to save anybody. Polka, or something like it. Cheerful tyranny. He watched the second hand on a small clock glued to the cinder block wall. He likes clocks. They make men believe in schedules. "You ever make a promise to yourself?" he asked, upside down in my head because of where he'd positioned the conversation. "The kind you keep no matter who's watching?" "Not to die in your house," I said. "Ambitious," he said, pleased. "But we can work with ambition. Ambitious boys are obedient when they need to be." "You keep saying boys," I said, stalling, testing. "You ever meet any men?" "Only in the mirror," he said, and I realized he thought that was humility. "Tell me my job," I said, as if I were still interviewing, as if content would kill panic. He shrugged. "You'll shovel, you'll haul, you'll shut up around clients, you'll smile at boys who look like you and tell them it gets better. You'll check your eyes in the mirror on your way out and decide you believe yourself." "I can do that," I said. "I know," he said. "That's why you're here." He circled me, not predatory, experimental, like a tailor fitting a suit. "You run?" he asked. "Track," I said. "Sprinter?" "Distance." He nodded, storing it like an insurance agent guesses at your life expectancy. He stepped into my space once and then stepped out, letting the rope do the work of making me move without moving me. "You good with pain?" "Depends who's asking." "Good," he said. "You're going to get gooder." He tied a second loop, loose, lazy, around my elbows, not to immobilize, to instruct. "Good posture," he said. "You slouch, I correct." He touched the rope like a violin string to make it hum, and the small sound of it raised something in my throat I wanted to keep private. He smelled like winter breath and cheap cologne and a drain that's been politely told not to complain. "What's your worst habit?" he asked. "Apologizing," I said. "You won't tonight," he said. "Not to me. You'll say thank you when I teach, that's all." "Teach what?" "Order," he said, and the word sounded to him the way forgiveness sounds to people who deserve it. He bent, slowly, without drama, and made sure my ankles knew their place. "Stand, sit, stand," he said, pointing at the floor, the chair, the floor again, like a coach with lungs enough to yell if he wanted, choosing not to because he didn't need to. I did it, and his face confirmed that he liked how I obeyed. "Good," he said. "Good boys keep the night from going off the rails." "Good boys go home," I said. "Sometimes," he said. "Sometimes they teach me how to be better." He looked toward the stairs, as if the house kept notes, and he wanted to check a file. He came back with a coil of clothesline and the kind of tie-down strap my dad used to pack a moving truck. He handled them the way I've seen priests handle incense. Habit, pleasure, story. He worked on the rope like it was garnish. He didn't have the frantic that would have given me something to grab. He kept talking like he was lecturing the room. "You know what I hate? Sloppiness. Boys who bleed like they're trying to write their names on my carpet. Boys who carry mud on their boots past the first cheap rug. Boys who laugh because they think they invented it." "You ever think you're talking to yourself?" I asked. He smiled. "Cute," he said. "Save it for the customers." He tapped the cuff with a knuckle. "You get cute here. You get corrected." "By what?" I said, like a kid asking what time it is after you've already said bedtime. "By me," he said, and for a moment the composure thinned, like a mouth showing teeth before a smile remembers its job. He set down the rope and picked up the deck of cards. He fanned them in my face, clumsy on purpose, the way men flirt with the idea of entertaining children at church fairs. "Pick a card," he said, and I laughed despite myself, because the room had turned into a bad joke and I was the punchline. I raised my hands, then realized the wrists would not allow it. He did the raising for me, with 2 fingers on the rope between, like a puppeteer making a demonstration for a class. "Pick," he said. I picked 8 of hearts. He nodded like that proved something. You know what 8 hearts look like put in a straight line? He asked. A good boy's life. He snapped the card back into the deck and shuffled. You know what a bad boy's life looks like? He splayed the cards and turned one face up. Joker. That. Your clown face in the living room, I said before I could keep it. He laughed, delighted. You like pogo, he said. Everybody likes pogo. I did not answer because answering would make it a conversation. I learned, there in that bad air, one small piece of survival. Don't make it a conversation. But he didn't need my half. He had both. You think you're the first, he said, gentle. You think you're the last. He set the cards down and inclined his head. No one's special. That's the mercy. Inside that sentence was a core so cold it burned. I studied his hands. They were plumber's hands in another life, thick where they needed to be, shameless about work. He had a knuckle scar I could have written a book about right then and there, a white diagonal like a tiny rail crossing. If the world had been fair, that scar would have taught him humility. He'd built something else with it, a chapel where only his rules prayed. He said, Kneel. I said, no. He said, I don't ask twice. Then, pleasantly, like a host telling you what the dessert is because the menu got soaked in wine. I looked at the clock on the cinder block wall. I named it 10 o'clock in my head even though it wasn't. I named my mother in the same sentence. I named the phone call. I named the neighbor. I let those names become a room I could stand in. Then, in a move that felt like treason against myself, I knelt. He sighed like a teacher whose favorite student finally understood long division. He touched the top of my head with 2 fingers, blessing me, or measuring me, or merely checking the map of my skull for exits. You're learning, he said, even if you hate it. I hate it, I said. He nodded. Hate is fine. Hate is tidy. He walked around behind me, and the rope followed his hand like a dog on a good day. He said, hands, and I tried to move them behind my back. He corrected me. No, there. And pushed my wrist to a place just up my spine, where the brachial nerve tells secrets about how long your arms can suffer before they call management. You're not going to keep me, I said. You're not going to tell me what I'm going to do, he said. He picked up the clothesline and tested it against itself, listening. You're going to do what you're told until the part of you that argues does math, and the answer is, I know more about the room than you do. I know more about me, I said. Not tonight, he said, and the soft in it hurt worse than the rope. He was good at what he did. That's what no one tells you in the pamphlets about staying safe. Sometimes the man is very good at the thing he shouldn't be doing. He bought rope that wouldn't cut so it could pretend to be kind. He pulled with a pressure that wanted to be a hug. He made the knots in such a way that policemen would later curse and then respect whoever taught him. You know what I like about the basement? He asked conversationally, as if we were 2 men killing an hour in a waiting room. The crawl. The what? He nodded toward the back wall where a panel had been cut in drywall, finished neatly, trimmed as if it were meant to impress an inspector. House is like a body, he said. Needs a bloodstream. You gotta crawl in it sometimes. Find clogs, fix smells, see what's settling where it shouldn't. Once you learn how a house breathes, you can decide whether to bless it with company or tell it to be alone. Who taught you that? I asked. It came out raw. My dad, he said, without ceremony. Man knew more about hiding than most ministers. He patted my shoulder as if he'd won a debate only he had entered. He trained me to be useful. I have to go home, I said. We all do, he said. Some of us take the long way. He stood in front of me again and considered my face as if he were choosing a paint color. You want the card trick again? He asked. Sometimes boys like to see what they can't do twice. Show me something else, I said. Show me mercy. He smiled. It wasn't cruel. It was tired. Mercy is for men who spill, he said. You haven't spilled yet. It's 10 o'clock, I said. He tilted his head. You keep saying that, he said. You make me think you're trying to make that true. I am, I said. He walked to the workbench against the wall and pretended to tidy for 30 seconds, the way a man easing himself into a lie likes to give his hands a chore. He picked up a pair of handcuffs from a drawer as if he'd forgotten they were there. You want the second cuff? He asked, holding it out like a second slice of cake. No, I said. Yes, he said. and his hand came forward in a friendly, absolute motion, the handshake that is a closing argument. I recoiled as subtly as rope allows. He stopped. He looked almost offended, as if I'd mispronounced his name in front of company. Then he smiled as if deciding to be above it. He set the cuff down. "Okay," he said. "Another trick." He reached out, slow enough for me to catalog it and too fast for me to stop it, and pinched the skin under my jaw with thumb and forefinger, that little inch of soft where boys hate to be touched. He pressed and the world went filmy for a second. Pain, not enough to be remembered by medical textbooks, plenty to make the rest of you be very cooperative while your body calls a meeting. "You move when I move you," he said gently. "You don't when I don't." "Okay," I said, and hated that the word tasted like thanks. He let go, patting the same place, and I loved him for a fraction of a fraction in the way some animals love the hand that stops hurting them. He saw it happen in my face, and that was his favorite trick of the evening so far. "You're my kind of boy," he said. The stairs creaked, a weight on them, then none, a house settling, the polygraph that is a 2-story frame after midnight. He didn't look up, but I saw him hear it. He didn't move to check. He didn't need to. He said, conversationally, almost to the stairs, "Go back to sleep." And then, because the house obeyed him, it did. He turned the radio down, then up, then landed on a whisper. He waited while the room remembered which of us was the story. Then he pulled a clean shop towel from a drawer and rubbed my wrists the way a mother rubs a boy's knuckles when he comes in from snow. "You're going to remember me," he said. "Not because you want to, because your body will insist." "Everyone," I said, and that word was my own, pure, perfect, a curse and a wish. He nodded, gave it as many syllables as it wanted, let it be the anthem it begged to be. "Everyone," he agreed. He stood, made a circle of the room with his eyes, returned to me, put his hand on the back of my head in a priest's weight. "You know how to pray?" he asked. "No," I said. "You do," he said. "You're doing it." He leaned closer. I breathed in the chlorine ghost and something else, something faint and sweet and wrong, and I made the smallest choice I have ever made that mattered. I coughed. Not dramatic, not movie, a real cough, the kind you can't stop in church. Inhale, a hiccup of panic, and then cough. Faint, human, slightly wet. The radio didn't care. The house might. "Cover your mouth," he said, with automatic Midwestern manners. I couldn't. The rope, the posture, the night. He frowned. "Don't get sick in here. You can be sick in the alley when I'm done." "I think I'm gonna—" I started, which is a sentence that does a lot of work for a boy hoping to survive. He stepped back, irritated purely on principle. "If you puke on my floor," he said, "I'll make you clean it," and he meant it more than he meant most things. He reached for the towel again, to give me a square I could be kneed into. "Turn your head," he said. I turned my whole body. He moved to correct. I moved more. The rope offered an inch of suggestion before it became a law again. I turned far enough to make him step to avoid my shoulder. As he stepped, his shin hit the chair leg. He winced and said the name of a god he didn't believe in. I coughed again, this time like a boy whose ribs needed to play a part. He put the towel toward my mouth with a little sigh. I bent, throat, shoulder, angle, there, and brought my forehead up under his chin. It wasn't a headbutt. It was an apology with momentum. His teeth clicked. His mouth swore in surprise, loud enough that the house remembered not to care. His hand went to my hair, to hold, to correct, to reassert ownership of the night. I coughed again, loudly, and then, not theater, actually let myself retch. The body is a history of small humiliations. This one may have saved me. I put it on the towel, not the floor, so even this weapon would obey his rules. He flinched back like a tidy man in the splash zone. He swore again, and then laughed at himself for swearing. "Christ," he said. "Sit." He pointed at the chair, and I folded into it. The ropes obeyed that geometry better than standing. He turned for the sink across the room, utility tub, field hospital for stains, and in turning he did a thing he didn't mean to do. He put his back to me. He trusted the knot. He trusted the room. He trusted the story. He rinsed the towel, wrung it out, turned the faucet off with the back of his wrist to keep his fingers respectable. He looked at the clock. He chose all of this over looking at me. I stood up. He turned as if the air had told him what I was doing and reached without looking at the rope. He didn't need his eyes to find it. He'd tied this enough to do it blind. He tugged. He expected compliance. The knot gave him respect, not surrender. I stepped. "Don't," he said, like a parent in a grocery store, and that word holds how much power my life had given it. I ran anyway. The first step bit, the second listened. The third said, "You sure?" The fourth was the loud one. The fifth told me the rope had been designed to make stairs a very stupid idea. He grabbed my ankle through rope. He is strong. That's the other thing no one tells you in the pamphlets. He is very strong. His hand closed around me, and my leg learned the vocabulary of being caught. I fell on my knees, and the stairs printed their decisions on my kneecaps. I kicked back and connected with Shin. He grunted, and he blessed me with the tiniest compliment, a small sound that said, "You're inconvenient." I felt him gather himself to be neat about pulling me backward into the basement where stories go to be finished. I shouted, a wordless, disrespectful thing. It was ugly, and it echoed. I shouted again, smaller, because the second shout is always smaller. I shouted a third time, and it had my mother's name hidden in it, even if you couldn't hear it. The radio tried to keep the basement from being an emergency. The house considered whether to assist. Upstairs, something knocked on the window. Once, twice. Then the third, louder, more deliberate, the way men tap the glass when they want to say, "You forgot the light." He froze the size you do when a cop is behind you at a red and you already know you did 3 things that would embarrass God. He didn't release my ankle, but his fingers loosened enough to let my skin remember its own name. He looked up at the ceiling. The house refused to tell him whether it planned to be a co-conspirator tonight. I did the stupid thing that saved me. "Ma?" I shouted, which is dumb, which is childish, which is the voice of the boy I'd been trying not to be all night. The name went upstairs like a balloon you weren't supposed to bring inside. It has power in Chicago. Even the churches know it when they hear it. The knock came again. This time with the rhythm of a key, the person on the porch hopes will be the right one. He let my ankle go in the same second that he decided to move the entire night forward faster. He stood. "Quiet," he hissed, and the hiss made me want to be loud. He moved with speed now, the neat punctured by hustle. He swore the tidy man's swear, "God damn it," and smoothed his hair like the person who owned it cared. "Don't say a word," he said, as if I hadn't spent the last 2 minutes turning words into a ladder. He went up the stairs. The house made room for him. I sat at the bottom step with rope on my wrists and rope on my ankles and rope, and the towel like a confession on the floor. I listened. I heard the small talk men make at doors. "Hey pal, forget to?" And the reply, the nice version, the practiced one, the one he uses for police and landlords and men who install cable. "Oh hey officer, sorry, I was in the can." I heard the officer's name in his mouth, which means the man who keeps a crawl space also keeps a mental Rolodex. "Evening, Frank. Everything all right?" Everything is not all right. I wanted to shout, but my throat was a fist and the rope liked its job. There is a sound a cop's flashlight makes when it takes in a man's face in a hallway and then asks politely to see the rest. I heard that. I heard the door admit the light, then the light do its work politely. Then the officer say, conversational, "You got someone with you?" Thought I heard. And the man say, "TV." And then my nephew, "Oh God, he tried that one. Kid's an idiot, got sick, you know how it is." I do not know how it is. I know how my mouth tried to decide whether to be brave. I made a sound that would look like a cough written down. The officer didn't hear it, or did, and put it in the column of weird things in basements on winter nights on the Northwest Side to be dealt with by men with different hours. "Mind if I?" said the officer. "Of course," said the man, like a host. He led the flashlight toward the kitchen, not the stairs. The house made itself long. I stood because the stairs had taught me how to stand with rope. I watched the top step like it was going to speak. They went one way, I went the other. I hopped up the stairs sideways, then forward, discovering the geometry, infantile, newly born into a problem with instant solutions. My shoulder hit a door jamb, and the pain felt like a teacher who had been right all along. I reached the top. The hallway held its breath. The bathroom the fan had been humming in was now silent. He'd turned it off as part of the show. The living room's clown photo smiled from the wall like a relative who votes wrong. The front door was open. The storm door was closed. The officer's back leaned into the kitchen. The man's voice filled the hall like Febreze. I put my cuffed hands on the storm door handle and pushed. It stuck like a chaperone. I pushed again, and the hinge said, "What are you doing?" The officer pivoted without fully turning. Men learn that at the academy, how to be two places halfway. "You good?" he said to me, like a neighbor. He wanted to stay a neighbor. "Yes," I said, my voice disguising itself as a boy's voice in trouble. "No, yes." The open door put winter on my face, and the air licked my fear clean. "Mind your manners," said the man, pleasant. The officer's eyes did a small math, and then, God bless him, he did the easiest, bravest thing a person can do. He put his foot on the threshold and said, "Hold up." Everything changed sizes. The rope shrank, the room grew. The man did a face, hurt, mildly, like he'd been insulted at a diner and was going to write a letter. The officer did another face, the one a parent does when a kid says nothing when their hands are behind their back. "Turn around," said the officer to me. I did. The rope was impossible to misread. I said he, and I, and basement, and please. And the officer said, "Okay, the way men say. Okay when what they mean is, everything's different now. There are 1,000 ways to end a night." This one chose a short struggle, the sound of a wrist meeting a doorknob on its way to learning humility. The word "sir" said twice in a tone that makes "sir" become a sentence, the radio on the officer's shoulder waking up like a mom who hears glass. The man made an argument that went nowhere. I made the sound boys make when the rope that was their past becomes a souvenir. "Let's talk downstairs," said the officer, businesslike. Or better, not. And because I said the words in the order humans believe, I work at the pharmacy. He said job. He said forms. And because officers on the Northwest Side had been hearing the wrong name saying missing for a long time, and because the house wanted to rest, finally, after years of being a bad church, we did the thing men hardly ever get to do. We left. The part after you don't die is uglier than a hospital gown and less private. There are forms and styrofoam cups and detectives who learn to talk like uncles. There are hard chairs and a blanket someone stole from somewhere with a cartoon on it that does not deserve this job. Your wrists spring tiny fountains under the rope's history. The officer says sorry, like it's his fault rope exists. You speak. Your voice votes for you. They let it count. A man with a mustache like a promise asked for the map of my night. I gave him the exits and the entrances. I gave him the detour through the pharmacy, the stop at help, the turn at hunger. He wrote handcuff trick and underlined key. He wrote PDM and then added clown with a punctuation he would later deny was a flourish. "What did he smell like?" he asked. "Fake," I said. "Under fake, a drain." He nodded like I described a theological concept in one syllable. "What did he call you?" he asked. "Good," I said, and my throat burned like I'd swallowed all the cigarettes I'd refused. "Did he use a name?" he asked. "Mine," I said. "Too often." They took pictures of my wrists like tourists. They did it gently, apologizing with their eyebrows. They asked me to draw the basement. I drew the dehumidifier with more detail than the drain. I don't know why. They asked me to mark where the Polaroid fell. I drew a white rectangle and put inside because the picture hadn't decided what it wanted to be when I left. They asked me if I would come to a place with wood paneling and unforgiving microphones. I said yes because saying yes felt like the only clean thing in a night that liked to make boys dirty. I wanted to say it to a room that could make yes become "we caught him." "Do you know his name?" I asked. They did. They said it with the patience of men who have been wanting to say it where it mattered. I said it back. John Wayne Gacy tastes like somebody else's middle name. PDM, Norwood Park, the crawl. I said it, and the room changed temperature. They asked me not to tell my friends. They asked me not to tell my mother until they could tell her too. They asked me to rest. They asked me if I needed a priest. I said no and yes and coffee. Morning found its way into the windows like a burglar with manners. The city brightened in a way that felt insulting. News vans learned where to park. Microphones learned how to wear empathy. I went home with a detective to make sure the house that had taught me my name did not let it dissolve. My mother made a sound she hadn't made since my sister got lost in the Jewel when she was 4. My father touched my shoulder like a man who knows how to repair pipes, but not this. Who? He asked, quietly. Your neighbor, I said, and hated that it fit inside a pronoun. The newspapers later had pictures of men with shovels and masks, moving earth in a crawl that never learned to keep exhaling. Words went where bodies had gone. The crawl gave back what had been asked to keep. The neighborhood reconsidered its Christmas. The clown face on the telephone pole looked obscene. Mothers learned how to say no to job offers made in parking lots. Boys learned how to check the car seat before they said, yeah, okay. They asked me to point to things, the hallway, the carpet that tells the truth, the door to the basement, the photo, the Polaroid, the rope, the cuff, the towel. They took the towel and put it in a bag and wrote a number on it that will never mean anything to anyone except the judge and God. They let me walk out the front door and then said, wait, because someone needed to sign something, and then said, okay, and then said, we'll be in touch, which is a cruel sentence when you would like to be held. They called. Often. They called when the house gave up boys' names like Old Testament. They called when they needed me to remember whether the clock had a red second hand. They called when they had found something they would not say over the phone, but wanted to make sure I would not be alone when I heard it. They called when they needed me to tell them whether he said good or helpful first, as if the order would teach them the trick. They called when the reporter didn't listen. They called when the judge did. They called when they hung up and cried. When it came time to sit in the room with wood paneling, I wore a shirt that didn't apologize for being tucked in. I said my lines. The defense asked me to demonstrate how a boy could cuff himself. I said no and tasted the rare fruit of successful rudeness. The prosecutor said, what did he do, in a voice that made he stay small? I said the rope and the smell and the fake and the drain, and the trick is he has the key, and the room went very quiet. The kind of quiet that counts and is counted. They read names out loud I did not deserve to hear. They read ages that do not fit in my mouth without turning into violence. They read crawl space so many times the syllables went dumb. They read December 11, and I looked at the grocery list on my mother's fridge that will forever have that date missing. They read Robert Peast like the air owed him. They said 33, and the number felt both too simple and too big. What a lie numbers are when they try to be mercy. When it was done, it was not done. Not for any of us. The city learned how to be a person in the mirror who doesn't trust his own mouth. Boys learned to say no to men who teach them to say brother. Parents learned that the monster does not live under the bed. He lives 3 doors down and plows alleys and waves at the block over barbecue smoke. Years turned. I saw his face on TV too many times. They interviewed him the way American TV loves to talk to men who think their badness is charisma. He did the eye thing for the camera, the one he would not give me. He made the hand that had held my jaw behave like it was asking for donations. He practiced neatness on the country. The country practiced watching him. On May nights, they mentioned a date and said lethal injection and practiced the relief of neat endings. A needle moved toward a man who had made rope into a sacrament. The state tried to tidy up a story that refuses to obey to this day. I did not watch. My father did. He said, humph, and turned off the TV like it was a light in a crawl he'd been in too long. I work at a different counter now. When boys leave their little cards, after school, weekends, good with my hands, I move them an inch to the left so they won't be the first thing a man sees when he comes in pretending to buy batteries. I tell them, if a man offers you a job in a car, make him write it down on paper while you watch him hold the pen with his right hand and his left hand open on the counter. We rehearse no in front of each other like it's a hymn. Sometimes they laugh at me. Sometimes they say thank you in a voice that makes me want to go find their mothers and tell them they did good work. I carry scissors in my backpack now because the dumbest things become tools when the night decides to be rude. I tie knots I can name. I learned the difference between apologize and confess. I taught my little cousin the sentence, I have to be home by 10 even if she's lying. I put my number in 2 boys' phones and said, if you need a ride and it's not your dad, it's me. I will sit in their passenger seat and tell them the story the long way if they want. Sometimes I dream of the rope as handwriting. It spells my name wrong. I wake up and write it on paper until the letters behave. Sometimes I taste the sweetness that tried to live in my house, and I brush my teeth until I am certain I know my own breath. Sometimes I pass Norwood Park and the saints refuse to look at me. I tell them I survived, and they nod, Catholic, but they don't move to clap. You don't clap for this. Survival is not a trophy. It's a schedule. It's calling your mother when you say you will and letting her be the police. It's cleaning out the junk drawer and finding the cuff you stole from his table the night the picture fell. Yes, I took it. Yes, I kept it. No, I will not throw it away, because I like to hold a thing and tell it the truth. You don't own me anymore. If you ask me what saved me, I can list 100 policies. The cough, the towel, the officer's foot, the luck of a knock, the way I turned my whole body when he wanted my head. But underneath all of it is one sentence I wish the city would stencil on our train platforms. You owe no man neatness. How am I doing now? Well, I tie only knots I can name. I keep scissors where my hands can find them in the dark, and I refuse to be neat for strangers. Killer revealed John Wayne Gacy, a.k.a. the Killer Clown. John Wayne Gacy, 1942 to 1994, was a Chicago area contractor and civic volunteer who murdered at least 33 boys and young men between 1972 and 1978, often luring victims with job offers through PDM contractors. He performed at events as Pogo the Clown. Following the December 11, 1978 disappearance of Robert Peast, Des Plaines police surveillance led to a search of Gacy's Norwood Park home, where evidence connected him to multiple victims. Many bodies were discovered in the crawl space and on the property. Others were recovered from rivers. Gacy was convicted in 1980 and executed by lethal injection on May 10, 1994. Debate about unidentified victims and case details persists, but Gacy remains one of America's most notorious serial killers.